I remember the exact moment when everything snapped into place. The lies, the gaslighting, the sneaky little smirks she gave me whenever she thought she had outmaneuvered me. Tonight was supposed to be another one of those nights. "I'm going out with the girls," she said, standing in front of the mirror, adjusting her earrings. "Don't wait up." It wasn't a request. It was a statement. She had already decided I wasn't worth the courtesy of a lie that even sounded convincing. "Oh, which girls?" I asked, leaning casually against the doorway, arms crossed. Her reflection in the mirror flickered for a moment. Just a microsecond of hesitation before she forced out a scoff. "You don't know them. New friends from work." New friends. Right. I knew exactly where she was going, and I sure as hell knew she wasn't meeting her girls. I had proof. A month ago, I would have let this slide. I would have convinced myself I was being paranoid. That the late nights, the hushed phone calls, the unexplained charges on our joint account were just coincidences. That the sudden irritation she had toward me, like I was nothing more than an annoying roommate instead of her husband, was just a rough patch. But that was before I saw the messages. I still remember the cold, gut-wrenching feeling when I saw her texts. "I can't wait to see you tonight. Wish I could stay the whole weekend face-blowing a kiss. I miss your hands on me, baby. My husband is so clueless, it's pathetic. Can't wait to get ruined by you again." Last night wasn't enough smiling face with horns. She wasn't just cheating. She was mocking me. And that was the moment I decided she wasn't just going to get caught. She was going to pay. The setup. I had been planning this for weeks. Every detail, every move had been methodically put into place. She thought she was 2 steps ahead of me, but in reality, I was 10 steps ahead of her. When she left the house, dressed to impress, for someone else, I didn't stop her. I didn't argue. I just watched. Watched as she strutted to her car, phone clutched in her hand, probably sending some last-minute flirty text to the man she was betraying me with. The moment she pulled out of the driveway, I went to work. Step 1. Access her laptop. She was careless, overly confident, so sure I would never suspect her. That was her first mistake. Her laptop password? My name. Irony at its finest. I went through her files, her emails, her hidden folders. Every disgusting message, every explicit picture, every plan she had made with him. It was all there. And I made sure to copy everything. Step 2, make some calls. I called her parents. Then, I called his wife. Oh yeah, he was married too. And unlike my wife, his wife actually was clueless. That changed tonight. Step 3, the perfect setting. While she was off playing the role of the sexy mistress, I was setting the stage for her downfall. By the time she walked back through our front door, thinking she was coming home to the same clueless, obedient husband, she had no idea that her entire world was about to crumble. I was waiting, and I wasn't alone. The front door creaked open at exactly 2:14 a.m. She thought she was sneaky, like I didn't already know the exact time she'd be back. The routine was always the same. Leave around 7 p.m., pretend she was going to dinner, then disappear for hours. A text here and there about how the girls were having such a fun night. A picture of a random cocktail stolen from Google Images to make it seem believable. Then, she'd stumble in after midnight, reeking of expensive cologne that wasn't mine. But this time I was ready. I was sitting in the living room, whiskey in hand, waiting. The room was dimly lit, just enough for her to see that something was different. The moment she stepped in, she froze. She knew. I could see it in her eyes. Panic, confusion, the wheels in her head spinning at full speed. "Hey," she said cautiously, trying to play it cool. "You're still up?" I took a slow sip of my drink before answering. "Yeah, thought I'd wait for you." She hesitated for a second, then forced a chuckle. "Oh, babe, you didn't have to do that. It was just a girls' night." I leaned forward, placing my glass on the coffee table. "Was it?" She blinked, her forced smile faltering just a little. "Of course. Why wouldn't it be?" I stood up and walked toward her, slow and deliberate. She was still holding her purse, fingers gripping the leather strap tightly. She always did that when she was nervous. I stopped just a few inches away from her, close enough to smell the scent of cheap lies and expensive betrayal on her. "Where were you?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Jesus, are we really doing this?" "I told you. I was out with friends." I nodded, pretending to consider it. "Right. Friends. Which ones?" Another flicker of hesitation. Another tiny crack in her perfect little lie. "You don't know them." "You mean like Amber?" The friend you were supposedly with last weekend? She swallowed hard. Yeah, Amber. What about her? I pulled my phone from my pocket, tapped the screen a few times, then turned it toward her. It was a text exchange between me and Amber. Me. Hey, Amber. Just checking, did you and my wife have fun tonight? Amber. What? We haven't hung out in months. Silence. Her face drained of color. Try again, I said, my voice colder now. She laughed, but it was shaky. Oh my God, you're ridiculous. So what? I wasn't with Amber. Maybe I went out with someone else. Why are you acting like a psycho? I tilted my head. Who was it, then? She was scrambling now, looking for an escape route. That doesn't matter, she snapped, suddenly defensive. What matters is that you're sitting here, acting like some crazy, insecure husband. I can't even go out without being interrogated? I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. You know what's funny? You didn't lie this much when you promised to love me forever. That one hit. I saw it in the way she flinched, just slightly, like she wasn't expecting me to fight back. That's the thing about liars. They expect you to be weak. They expect you to believe them, to question yourself, to bend until you break. But I wasn't bending. Not anymore. You want to know where I was? She suddenly snapped, dropping the act completely. Fine. I was with someone else. Is that what you wanted to hear? Is that what's going to make you happy? I didn't react. I just stared at her. She was expecting a fight. Tears. Yelling. Maybe even begging. Instead, I smiled. A slow, cold, knowing smile. Yeah, I said quietly. I know. She blinked, momentarily thrown off. You, what? I know everything, I repeated. I know about the hotel room. I know about the texts. I know about the pictures you sent him. I know about the way you laughed at me behind my back. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Like she wanted to deny it but realized there was no point. Her entire body tensed, and for the first time since she walked through that door, she looked afraid. What? What did you do? She whispered. I took another sip of my drink. Let the silence stretch between us. Let her mind race through all the possibilities. And then I said, why don't you go check your phone? Her hand flew to her purse, fingers fumbling as she pulled out her phone and unlocked it. And that's when she saw it. The messages. The screenshots. The pictures. Sent. To. Everyone. Her parents. Her coworkers. Her boss. And, of course, to his wife. She let out a strangled gasp, staring at the screen in horror. No. 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 What did you? I leaned in close, just enough for her to hear the final nail in her coffin. I told you not to come home tonight, I whispered. And then, as she stood there, shaking, her phone started ringing. It was her mother, then her boss, then her lover's wife. And I just sat back down, watching as her entire world collapsed in real time. This was only the beginning. She stood frozen, her phone trembling in her hands as the calls and messages poured in. Her mother, her boss, her sister, his wife. Each call, each text, a reminder that her perfectly crafted web of lies had been torn apart in one single night. I watched as her breath came in sharp gasps, panic setting in as reality slammed into her like a freight train. You, she whispered, eyes wide with disbelief. You ruined my life. I leaned back against the couch, swirling the whiskey in my glass, unfazed. No, sweetheart. You ruined your life. I just gave everyone a front row seat to the show. Her hands clenched into fists. You had no right. No right? I cut her off, laughing coldly. You had no right to drag me through the mud, to make me feel like I was losing my mind while you were screwing someone else. You had no right to lie to my face every single day, acting like I was the problem. She opened her mouth to respond, but the blaring ringtone from her phone interrupted. Her boss again. Her breathing grew ragged. She knew what that meant. She knew she wasn't just losing her marriage, she was losing everything. I stood up and walked past her, heading toward the kitchen, letting her stew in her own downfall. Behind me, I heard her fumbling to answer the call. Hello. Her voice cracked as she tried to sound normal. What? No, that's not true. Pause. I imagined what was being said on the other end. The same screenshots I had sent to everyone else, now sitting in her boss's inbox. I had made sure to include the ones where she mocked her job, where she laughed about how she used her position to take extra time off for her secret little meetings. I poured myself another drink, listening as she sputtered, her excuses growing more desperate. Please, listen. That's not it. Another pause. And then, a choked sob. Her boss had just fired her. The glass in my hand felt heavier, the weight of justice settling in. I turned just in time to see her lower the phone, her face drained of color. "You sent it to my boss," she whispered, as if saying it out loud would somehow make it untrue. I shrugged. Seemed fitting. "You were screwing around on company time, after all." Her lips parted, then twisted into something between rage and despair. "You're a monster." I chuckled. "No. A monster wouldn't have given you a chance to come clean. A monster wouldn't have just exposed you. A monster would have destroyed you completely." And that's when I saw it. The shift. The panic turned into something else. Anger. Desperation. A cornered animal realizing there was nowhere left to run. She suddenly lunged forward, shoving me hard in the chest. "You think this makes you a man?" she screamed, tears now spilling down her face. "You think ruining me makes you better than me?" I didn't even flinch. I just looked down at her, unmoved by the theatrics. "Better than you?" I echoed. "That's not even a competition, darling." Her breath hitched, and for a split second, I thought she might actually hit me. But then, just as quickly as the fury had come, it flickered into something else. Pleading. She reached for me, her manicured nails curling against my shirt. "Please," she whimpered. "Please, we can fix this. I'll do anything." I tilted my head, pretending to consider it. "Anything?" She nodded frantically. "Yes." I was stupid, I wasn't thinking. I grabbed her wrist and pulled her hand off me, stepping away like she was something filthy. "There's nothing to fix," I said simply. She stumbled backward, fresh tears spilling. "You don't mean that." I met her eyes, letting the finality sink in. "You were never going to stop," I said, voice steady. "You would have kept lying, kept laughing at me behind my back, kept sneaking around, thinking you were untouchable." I gestured around us. "How does it feel, knowing you're not?" She let out a strangled sob, cradling her face in her hands. I let her cry. Then, after a moment, I grabbed the duffel bag I had packed earlier and tossed it onto the floor beside her. Her head snapped up. "What's this?" "Your stuff," I said. "What little I felt like letting you keep." Her eyes darted from the bag to me, a new kind of horror creeping into her expression. "Wait, no? You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm dead serious." Her whole body started shaking as she realized what was happening. "Where am I supposed to go?" I smirked. "Why don't you call your boyfriend and find out?" A fresh wave of panic flashed across her face. Because I knew what she didn't. I had spoken to his wife, and I had sent her everything. Right about now, her lover's world was also crumbling, and I had no doubt that by morning, she wouldn't have him to run to either. She was utterly, completely alone. She knew it too. Her knees buckled, and for a moment, I thought she was going to collapse. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't do this. I'll change. I held up a hand, cutting her off. "Get out." She stared at me. I stared back. And then, finally, she understood. There was nothing left to say. She picked up the bag with trembling fingers, her entire body shaking as she walked to the door. Before she stepped out, she turned to me one last time, her voice barely above a whisper. "I hate you." I smiled. "Trust me," I said. "Not as much as I hate you." And with that, she was gone. I shut the door behind her, locked it. Then, I sat back down, took another sip of my whiskey, and let the quiet settle in. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe. And for the first time in a long time, I was free. The moment she stepped out of the house, my world became lighter. I stood there, watching from the window as she stumbled toward her car, hands shaking as she fumbled with the keys. She was still crying, still muttering to herself, still trying to process the fact that everything she had built on lies had burned down in one night. I almost laughed. She had spent months making a fool out of me, believing I was too blind, too weak to ever fight back. But now she was the one sitting in the wreckage, while I stood untouched. She got in her car, but she didn't start it right away. She just sat there, staring ahead at nothing, like she was waiting for a miracle that would never come. I imagined the thoughts running through her head. Where could she go? Who would take her in? Certainly not him. Her affair partner's wife had made sure of that. I knew because she had called me just minutes after receiving the messages. At first, she had been silent. Then, a shaky breath. "Is this real?" "As real as it gets," I had said. More silence. Then, a quiet, deadly whisper. "Thank you." And that was that. I had no doubt she was tearing into her husband at this very moment, throwing his clothes out, screaming, shattering every illusion he had. Which meant my wife had no one left. She knew it, too. Her phone lit up in the darkness. She grabbed it, eyes desperate. I already knew what she was hoping for. A message from him. A promise that he'd take her in, tell her everything would be fine, that he still loved her, that they could escape this together. Instead, I watched as her face twisted in horror. I smirked. She had just seen the last message I sent him. Your wife knows. Good luck. Her head snapped up. I was darting toward the house like she wanted to charge back in and rip me apart. But she didn't move. Because she knew. She had lost. Finally, she started the car, tires screeching as she sped off into the night, running like the coward she was. I let out a slow breath, my grip on the whiskey glass loosening. It was over. I turned away from the window and walked through the empty house. No more lies. No more deceit. Just silence. A silence I welcomed. But this wasn't enough. Not yet. My revenge wasn't just about exposing her, it was about ensuring she suffered. That she felt what I felt. That she lost everything the way I had lost everything. And I wasn't finished. Not yet. The next move. The next morning, I woke up early. I had barely slept, but that didn't matter. I had things to do. The first stop was the bank. I had already removed her as an authorized user from my accounts weeks ago, but I wanted to make sure everything was locked down tight. I withdrew a good chunk of my savings and placed it into a new account, one she'd never have access to. Next, I called my lawyer. Divorce papers had already been prepared, but I wanted them served immediately. No waiting. No mercy. He assured me it would be done by the end of the day. Perfect. Then came the final step. Her job was already gone. Her affair partner had abandoned her. She had no money, no support, no place to stay. Now, it was time to make sure she had nowhere to go. I made a call to our landlord. Hey, man, I said, keeping my voice casual. So, my wife moved out last night. Just letting you know she won't be on the lease anymore. A pause. Wait, she moved out? Yep, I said, smirking. For good. The landlord let out a low whistle. Damn, that was fast. Yeah, well, things happen. Another pause. Then, so, you're still staying though? I grinned. Oh, absolutely. Because unlike her, I had planned for this. I had already spoken to the landlord a week ago, quietly transferring the lease into my name. She had nowhere left to return to. Nowhere to run. She was completely, utterly alone. And the best part? She deserved every second of it. By the end of the day, I got a text from my lawyer. She's been served. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. I could picture it, the look on her face when she saw the divorce papers, the realization sinking in that she had lost everything. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. A few hours later, my phone buzzed again. It was her. I didn't even have to read it to know what it said. I deleted it. Then, I blocked her number. This was my final gift to her. No screaming. No fights. No closure. Just silence. Because in the end, that's what hurt the most. And I wanted her to feel it. The silence was deafening. I had expected more from her, more calls, more texts, more desperate attempts to weasel her way back into my life. But after that final, unread message, she went quiet. Maybe it had finally sunk in. Maybe she was too busy dealing with the wreckage I had left in her life. Either way, I didn't care. I was done. The house was mine now. The money was safe. The divorce was in motion. And her? She was nothing. Still, I couldn't help but wonder where she had gone. Not because I cared. Because I wanted to know just how deep she had fallen. Curiosity killed the marriage. That night, I went to the gym. Not because I needed a workout, although the stress of the past few weeks had definitely made me crave the burn, but because I knew exactly who I'd find there. Her affair partner. I spotted him almost immediately, running on the treadmill like his life depended on it. He hadn't noticed me yet, so I took my time, stretching, watching. His face looked different. Gaunt. Tired. I smirked. Trouble in paradise already? Finally, he caught sight of me. He slowed his run, hesitating, unsure of whether to acknowledge me. I didn't give him a choice. I walked right up to the treadmill, arms crossed, watching as he struggled to keep up the pace. He gave me a weak nod. Hey, man. I smiled. How's the wife? His foot caught on the belt. He stumbled, nearly face-planting before catching himself. I laughed. That bad, huh? His jaw tightened. Look, I don't want any trouble. I raised an eyebrow. Trouble? You already found plenty of that all on your own. He sighed, wiping sweat from his forehead. She left me. I feigned shock. No way. Didn't see that coming. He shot me a glare, but he had no fight left in him. She took the kids and moved in with her sister, he muttered. Won't even let me see them. I tilted my head. Oof. And here I thought you were living the dream. His face darkened. It's not like that. Really? I scoffed. Because last I checked, you and my wife had no problem parading around like you were untouchable. He flinched. Good. Where is she? I asked. He hesitated. Then, finally, I don't know. I narrowed my eyes. Try again. He let out a slow breath. She came to me after you kicked her out, he admitted. Begged me to let her stay. I smirked. And let me guess, you turned her away. He rubbed the back of his neck. I had no choice. My wife was still home, and, well, after she saw the texts, she gave me one last chance to fix things. If I let your wife in, I would have lost everything. I let that sink in. My cheating wife, cast aside by the very man she had risked it all for. I almost pitied her. Almost. So I pressed. Where did she go? He shook his head. No idea. She called me a few times after that, but I stopped answering. Haven't heard from her in days. Days. That meant she was still out there, still trying to claw her way back into some semblance of a life. I should have felt satisfied, but I wasn't done yet. One last goodbye. 2 days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe the desire to see how much lower she had sunk, made me answer. Hello. Silence. Then, a shaky breath. Please. Her voice was raw, hoarse. I leaned back in my chair, smirking. Didn't expect to hear from you again. I need help, she whispered. I said nothing. She sniffled, as if realizing I wasn't going to offer sympathy. I have nowhere to go. That's not my problem, I said coldly. Please, she begged. Just let me stay for a night. Just one night. I don't even need to come inside. I don't know what else to do. I pretended to think. Maybe you should call one of your friends. She let out a weak, humorless laugh. You mean the ones who all hate me now? The ones who blocked me after you exposed everything? I shrugged. Sounds like a you problem. Silence. Then, so softly I almost didn't hear it. I fucked up. I smiled. Yeah, you did. Her breath hitched. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just need. She trailed off, like she didn't even know what she was asking for anymore. I didn't care. I wasn't in the business of saving people who didn't deserve it. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. You made your bed, I said. Now go lie in it. Then, before she could say another word, I hung up. And this time, I didn't just block her number. I deleted it. For good. The call lingered in my mind longer than I expected. Not because I felt guilty, not because I regretted hanging up, but because, for the first time, I realized she was truly gone. Not just from my house, not just from my life, from everything. She had no job, no home, no friends, and no one left to turn to. It should have made me feel victorious. It should have been the final, satisfying moment of my revenge. But instead, all I felt was nothing. And that, I realized, was true victory. Because once upon a time, she had power over me. The lies, the manipulation, the way she twisted reality until I questioned myself. But now, she was just another voice on the other end of a call, a fading echo of a life I no longer belonged to. And I had moved on, cleaning up the mess. The divorce process moved fast, faster than she probably expected. I had my lawyer handle everything, and since she had no job, no legal representation, and no way to fight back, the papers went through with barely a whisper of resistance. She signed them. She had no choice. 2 weeks later, I was officially a free man, and I didn't even bother telling her. Let her find out when she gets the final notice. Let her realize she isn't just homeless, she's alone. I changed my locks, moved my money, rebuilt my life one brick at a time. And it felt good, better than good. It felt like revenge done right. The last sight of her. A month passed before I saw her again. I wasn't looking for her. But life has a funny way of throwing things in your path when you least expect it. I was at a cafe, grabbing coffee before work, when I spotted her sitting outside. Or at least, what was left of her. She looked wrecked. Hair unwashed, dark circles under her eyes, clothes that looked like she had been living in them for days. And maybe she had been. She sat alone, arms crossed, staring at her phone like she was waiting for something, someone. A lifeline that wasn't coming. She didn't see me. And I didn't say a word. I just stood there for a moment, watching, realizing that this mess of a person was the same woman who had once walked through my house like she owned it. The same woman who had looked me in the eye and laughed when she thought I'd never figure it out. The same woman who thought she would win. And now? She was nothing. I took a slow breath, then turned away, because there was nothing left to say. And as I walked off, I smiled to myself. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't look back. I could have walked away forever that day. Left her in that cafe, a shadow of the woman who once tormented me, and never thought about her again. But something inside me itched, one last piece of unfinished business. I wanted to make sure she stayed buried. So, I made a call. The last favor. The person I contacted wasn't a lawyer, wasn't a friend. It was her former boss. The one who had fired her after I sent the messages exposing her affair. I still had his number from an old work event we had attended together when things were good. I didn't even have to explain myself. The moment he answered, he sighed. What now? Relax, I said, sipping my coffee. I'm not calling to stir anything up. Just wanted to check something. A pause. Then, about your ex? Yeah. Another sigh. I figured. I leaned against the cafe counter, watching her through the window. You haven't heard from her, have you? A humorless chuckle. Oh, I've heard from her. She's been calling nonstop, begging for another chance. Says she made a mistake. That she's learned her lesson. I smirked. And fuck no, that's what, he said. She embarrassed the company. Made us look like a damn joke. There's no coming back from that. Good. I glanced back outside. She was still there, staring at her phone, waiting for a call that would never come. Do me a favor, I said. Silence on the other end. Then, depends. Make sure she never works in this city again. A low whistle. Cold-blooded, man. I shrugged. Is that a yes? A pause. Then consider it done. I smiled. Appreciate it. I hung up without another word. It was over. She was done. The inevitable desperation. It didn't take long before she tried to crawl back. A week later, an unknown number texted me. Please talk to me. I ignored it. An hour later, another message. I'm sorry. I just want to explain. I ignored that one, too. Then, at 2 a.m., a final text. I have nothing left. I read it. Let the words sink in. And then, without hesitation, I deleted the conversation, blocked the number, went to bed, and I slept better than I had in years. A life without her. I never saw her again after that. Maybe she left town. Maybe she drifted from couch to couch, burning bridges with every person she tried to manipulate. Maybe she finally realized that karma had given her exactly what she deserved. It didn't matter, because I had one. I rebuilt my life. New apartment, new friends, new happiness. And best of all, she was nothing more than a fading memory. A lesson learned. A ghost I had exorcised from my life. Forever. 2 years later, I barely thought about her. Life had moved on. I had moved on. I was in a new city, with a new job, a new home. A better one. One that didn't have her ghost lingering in the walls. I had met new people, built something real again. And the best part? I had finally forgotten what it felt like to be betrayed. Until she found me. A familiar face in a strange place. It happened in the most unexpected way. I was at a restaurant with some friends, celebrating a promotion. Drinks, laughter, the kind of joy I had thought I'd never feel again. Then, as I turned to order another round, I saw her. She was waiting tables. Hair dull, posture slouched, face aged beyond her years. She didn't see me at first, and for a second, I considered slipping away before she did. But then our eyes met, and I saw it. Recognition, shock, shame. She froze mid-step, tray trembling in her hands. She opened her mouth, like she wanted to say something, an apology, a plea, a desperate attempt to rewrite history. But I didn't give her the chance. I just smiled. A slow, cold, knowing smile. Then, I turned back to my friends, raising my glass. I didn't need to say anything. She knew. She knew that I had moved on, that I had won, and that she had lost. Forever.